Well, hi, beautiful friends. It's Marianne Goldweber, owner of A Village, which is a personal and spiritual development center here in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a spiritual teacher, an elder, professional medium, and I'm looking forward to talking to you tonight. So this is my Wednesday night video podcast called Marianne's House. And I've been going live every Wednesday night. And just so you know, I upload these to YouTube when I'm done. And so you can look at the different topics that we have. And so tonight's topic is about connection. And this is a very deep topic, and we're only going to touch the surface of it tonight. I actually do supportive classes and things that delve deeper into some of the things that we talk about. A little news out of the way. I have a special right now until Sunday or Monday, for virtual readings. So if you guys want a session, you can buy a gift certificate, which is good for 3 months, or you can just purchase it on my website, mariannegoldweber.com, and then give me a call to schedule. So if you want a gift certificate, just make sure that you text me your email address. My phone number is 216-324-2657, and I get that out to you right away. You can keep it for yourself or print it and give it. You can use it for sessions or coaching. So that was the kind of news. I also have that special going on for private events through the end of August. This is a great time before everybody gets back into the routines with school and college and all of those things, to get all your friends and relatives together, and let's have a group event. Oh my God, there's so much fun, and we get to talk about what's going on for everybody, so you're all on the same page. And your loved ones and ancestors love talking to the group. They finally get an audience, so they have all this wisdom to share with all of us. So grab your cuppa. Tonight I have a couple of beverages. Okay, I got coffee, which I probably shouldn't be drinking this late. And it says all heroes don't wear capes. One of my favorite mugs. So make sure when you show up that you post that you're here. Put a little comment on there, and I'll try to answer you during the broadcast. So anyway, so let's talk about connection. So as humans, so we're spiritual beings. We were absolutely connected on the other side. Everything over there is energy. It runs parallel to this life, and we were all connected completely and utterly. There's no separation between us as our energy beings that you call the soul on the other side. And so then we take this mission, this human journey, and we get plunked down into this new body, which I lovingly refer to as a meat suit. And when we come into this human body, we become separate. Separate from, it's like riding around in a car, okay? So this body is, limits us from connecting with other people, okay? So it's kind of like our soul's riding around in this car, and we're separate from where we came from, okay? But we all have this divine tether. We all have this kind of hotline or divine connection that never abandons us as we're in this human journey. It's just that most of us in this human reality haven't been taught that we have our own divine connection. They want us to think that that's up to somebody else. You got to seek that out, find it from someone else. Well, so we're all on a learning curve. None of us were taught these things. So anyway, so what I want to talk about is, once we're in this physical body, we can only experience this human reality. And this body came with things that helped us understand the world around us, okay? And we call these the senses, okay? So our sense of sight, our sense of smell, tells us how to, what's going on around us. It gives us clues as to what's going on. Our hearing, sound, taste, that's another one, But the one that always fascinated me was the sixth sense, or the one that they hadn't really acknowledged. And some people call this extra sensory perception. So our hearing, our sight, our taste, our touch, those are sensory experiences. But there's an extra sensory perception. Now, I was aware of this very young in life, okay, that there was this extra thing that I had. I wasn't sure if other people had it. And so it was really funny because when I was in like the 4th grade, I went to a parochial school, okay? So the teacher had asked everybody at that time, what do you want to be when you grow up? She'd asked the class. So everybody, raised their hand and said, oh, I want to be a cop, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a nurse, I want to, standard responses. And then there's me in the back row, and I said, I want to be a parapsychologist. Right? It was 1970 something, okay? In a Catholic school. Oh my God. The looks I got, okay? And so I was always wondering why I had this interesting ability to sense things that other people couldn't. So, for instance, it would pop in my head, a song, and I would kind of sing it out loud or hum it out loud, and it would freak somebody out because they were just thinking the same thing, okay? So this clairvoyant, this empathic, this kind of thing I was always able to do, and it made people got scared, okay? I mean, it was like I was reading their mind, but I really wasn't. That's telepathy. So now I know what this is and how it works and how to do it. But so then I was looking things up because I didn't understand, and there wasn't any really grown-ups that I could go to and say, oh, by the way, I can do this. How about you? But without, again, the systems I was born to were not really tolerant of people being different, okay, in any capacity. So anyway, and I know most of you have had that experience as well. So our body comes here with these senses in order to understand the world around us, okay? And so those are tools. But the 6th sense, this divine connection, is another part of who we are. And that's where we can feel other people's energy, okay? We can feel if somebody's in a good mood or a bad mood. We can sense things that maybe you can't see, So for me, the other side is not somewhere else. And I've always been able to perceive things that others couldn't see, okay? I could feel that, okay? So anyway, so that's what this body comes with. Now, the challenge is we're separate. We're all in these separate little containers, and we're just kind of, bumping into each other throughout life. And we can only get so close to each other, And this is why a human's need for connection is vital. Now, it's not just vital physically, but emotionally and spiritually as well. And, we've got so much separation and so much division going on in our world that it's creating this isolation, that can cause all kinds of dysfunctions, all kinds of disease in our body, in our world. And I wanted to talk to you guys about the most basic part of connection with other humans. We'll talk about a couple of them, but it's a deep dive, guys, okay, really. And this is something I do in a class that I call Defining Our Relationships, okay? And we do a bigger deep dive on that when it comes to assessing other people and building healthy, interdependent relationships, which, again, none of us have really been taught how to do that. So anyway, what are the rules for engagement when it comes to other humans? Okay, most of us didn't get that class, okay? So anyway, so when we're in these human bodies, our need for connection actually is threefold. It creates physical response. Okay, this is where there are different chemicals released. It releases dopamine. So when we engage with each other, in a casual way, okay, it releases endorphins or dopamine in the body, and it makes us feel good, okay? And so this is why it doesn't have to be some giant thing, okay? Just connecting with other humans. And because we have had things that make us feel separate, okay, we have to establish these connections with each other again. And it can be as simple as
going through the grocery store and noticing someone and smiling at them. So this is a cumulative thing, okay? So if you have someone hold the door for you, or smiles at you, or compliments you, those add up during the day. Now, it's interesting how one negative thing can just kind of undo all of that, all right? So this is why establishing these connections doesn't really take a risk. So when we visually notice each other, people notice your energy as well. And so, that's something that is intangible. You can't see it, but you can feel it. So when you're looking at someone, really engaged, and smiling at the same time, they go, oh, this is a person I can trust. They assess that, okay? And then again, audibly we're listening, and our conscious and subconscious is going on simultaneously, and so that releases these feel-good hormones in our body, and so that can have a cumulative effect. And this is why isolation is so dangerous, because most of us aren't taking care of ourselves or creating connection with ourselves, and we're so many people are malnourished, for that connection. Now, touch is another amazing way to connect with another human being. But again, there's what we're talking about tonight is just shaking hands with someone or giving them a hug. It says I'm a safe place. And there's just not enough of that out here in the world. Now, I'm not saying that you got to run up and hug strangers, but we don't even hug ourselves. I was watching this girl who's been doing yoga out in the community, just pulling up on folks hanging out outside and doing yoga with them. And at the end of her yoga session, she had them hugging themselves, okay? And so she's in the inner city. And so she had them finish by hugging themselves. And she said to this group of young men, actually, when was the last time you hugged yourself? And this one young man said, I've never hugged myself. Right. So if we're malnourished for touch, we're going to be looking for that out in the world, in not necessarily healthy ways that might compromise who we are, and so this is why we have to work on self-care, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, because that fills us up and gives us makes us feel good and confident, and then we can share that with each other out in the world. And so when was the last time you hugged yourself? There's not always people around here hugging me, okay? I hug myself, and I really take space and do that, okay? It was really funny because one time I was taking like this 2-minute military shower, and my inner guidance is like, what are you doing? You wouldn't bathe a dog like that. And I realized that, that we're not taught that nurturing ourselves or being kind to ourselves, is valuable. It fills us up. Now it's not enough. It's so funny because, it's kind of like you can't tickle yourself. Okay. So some of the nurturing that we get, the self-care nurturing stuff. Now I'm talking about just being kind to yourself, feeding yourself, making food that's healthy, and taking those actions like we would with another human being. That is a nurturing act. That makes us feel safe. And it makes us feel loved, okay? Now, having other people in our world, our trusted relationships that we can turn to for those things. And this is why, like when I have the village gatherings and you come, it's about creating connection. And when you come often enough, you might feel comfortable enough to just hug each other. These people are no threat, and so we have to find those ways to connect, not only with ourselves and having that for ourselves, but noticing and seeing where the malnourishment, the neglect that we're getting in our world is because of these purposely created divisions over this things. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the divisions are about. It could be race, it could be gender, it could be whatever. But that's not the point. It's about dividing people, because then they feel like they don't have hope, and nobody's seeing them, and nobody cares. So these simple acts of connection which is noticing one another, complimenting one another, holding the door for someone. Those add up in the course of a day. And imagine if we all were just doing these kindnesses, and again, doing those things for yourself. Now here's another aspect. So another way to fill ourselves up is, touch. Touch is powerful, okay? And again, being kind to ourselves. Going for a massage or, having body work done, okay? That is another way. Or someone doing your hair, in a trusted situation. That is a nice add-on, okay? That is another person giving you that nurturing act, which helps, okay? But there's a whole nother hormone that's released when we're with trusting people, and we can create that intimacy, okay? That trusted intimacy with other trusted people in our life, okay? And this is why building relationships is vital. I have trusted relationships, friendships that are border on family. Okay, they are family now. And I know that I can be vulnerable, and they can be vulnerable with me, and that, when we embrace or, not cuddle, but, hold each other, that's a safe thing, that nobody's going to take advantage of that, and that's another thing that a lot of people are really thirsty for. So we don't know necessarily how to be in connected situations with ourselves. And the more connected you are with yourself, the more confident that you are when you go out and I'm not here to change people's whole lives. I'm just here to connect. Quite often, and I talk about this a lot of the outreach I do is just in normal places, or outreach. And it's not about giving out Narcan or body care products. It's about connecting with other humans. That thing that I'm handing them, it's not about the thing. It's about connecting with them, seeing them, acknowledging them, okay? And that fills people up. That's like food for the soul, okay? And it helps us emotionally. And so when we look at the physical neglect, the emotional neglect, and the spiritual neglect that people have experienced that are creating this division, we can help heal that by connection in whatever way, that we can do that. So like I said, this is not a deep dive tonight because this is a very complicated topic. It was very interesting because quite often I'm with people who've been neglected, okay, since the beginning, never received that nurturing. And that's actually a very profound thing when it comes to, especially like infants, and the bonding that occurs when they're held and they're felt safe, that helps them later to feel emotionally regulated, okay? And so when they cry, it's only they're wet, or they're, they got a gas bubble, or they had a nightmare. Okay, and when we hold them and we nurture them when they're doing that, it helps them be able to regulate later. I mean, look this up, okay? So again, physically, our body has needs. Emotionally, our body has needs. And then there's this spiritual thing that connects us to each other. And so we have to reestablish these connections, okay? I'm a soul, you're a soul. We came into this human journey to do whatever the hell it is we're supposed to do. And if we could just hold each other up and help each other, notice each other, while we're all out here doing our experience, this world would be a much better place. So yes, looking at someone, speaking to them, listening, okay, using your empathic knowing. Okay, it doesn't mean I'm supposed to solve all their problems, but I can at least understand, come to a place of understanding, and that's how we develop these connections. Just touching someone gently on the arm or holding their hand. Like I said, when I hand things to people, okay, when we're doing outreach or whatever, it's not about the thing, but that's the thing that connects us for a minute, where we can touch each other while I hand it to you, okay? And that is more valuable than whatever it was I gave them, And that's the point, is what can we do to connect? You know, what can you do in your world to connect, not only with yourself, but with other people? There's no risk, honestly. So I was in the grocery store the other day. Of course, this is my biggest outreach place. And even if somebody looks crabby, okay, I don't take that personal, okay? Because I have a resting bitch face and I'm just walking, you know, focused on what I'm doing, okay? And so if someone looks at me, I'm gonna smile and look back, okay? That's what we do. So, you know, there was this guy and he seemed kind of crabby. And it was funny because, you know, I don't judge that. That's just, you know, an observation. And again, I don't know what's going on in his world, you know, that makes him look like that. The other day I was bawling like you know, just tears coming down my face while I'm in the store. Because I was just letting something out. Well, anyway, so I look at this man, and we're in the same aisle, and so he looked at me, and so I looked at him, and of course I'm going to smile, right? You know, and he didn't smile back, but that's okay. You know, it doesn't matter. Well, I ran into him in the next aisle, okay, and we met up again, and so he looked at me again, you know, as if to say, oh, you're here again in the same aisle. And I looked at him again and I smiled and I just kept going on doing what I was doing. And you know, it was funny because I noticed that he stepped livelier. Like he seemed lighter. You know, guys, this is the point. You know, most people walk around this world thinking they're invisible. And nobody's noticing them, you know? And something as simple as connecting that way actually releases dopamine and other hormones in our body that make us feel good. He might not even know that it was because I looked at him and smiled twice, okay? But he felt better. You know, just having another human being look at him and not acknowledge him. You know, it's so simple. It's so simple. It's hard, guys. So connection. You know, so we're in these separate meat suits. We're all just trying to navigate out here in the world, and we can only get so close to one another in this form. You know, and we all yearn for that. We all yearn for connection, but quite often, sometimes we settle for things that, you know, just aren't right or don't put us in harm's way, or it doesn't feel good, because all we really want is to be loved and seen and understood. It's so simple, you know. And so I know so many people, and myself included, who've compromised myself in a lot of other ways because all I really wanted was to be accepted, right? Right. It put me in a lot of situations that were not good for me. But again, you know, it's like standing at the buffet of life and you're hungry. So you're going to eat the first thing that comes down the conveyor belt. This is that defining relationships class that we talk about. You know, and so when we start alleviating our own hunger through connections, you know, our different connections, we don't settle. Because I can fill my own needs. I trust myself. And so therefore I don't need to accept what isn't what's right now versus what's right. Because I trust. And I trust myself. And I trust there's something bigger than me that's helping me out. You know? So, yes, let's establish these connections. So I have open houses. I have the Moon Lodge group that meets. You know, I put out events out there in the world. You know, sometimes I'm just like, where's Waldo? And I'll show up in a park with my lawn chair. You know, so stay tuned for those things. And the best way to stay connected with me, guys, because social media is a crapshoot, okay? Just go to my website, okay? And I'm in the middle of updating some things anyway. So if you go to my events page, you know, once a month I'm going to start showing up somewhere. And I'll definitely let people know ahead of time. So yeah, so let's all get inspired. Let's all get connected. You know, let's get connected to the people that make us feel good and seen. And, you know, and I need you guys as much. It's windy out here. I cut my hair today. I look like Billy Idol. I got my Billy Idol look going. Anyway, yeah, so we all need connection. You know, I joke about it all the time, but I'm very good with being by myself. There's a difference between being by yourself and being lonely. Now, I like my own company, and I have places and people that I can turn to if I want company. You know, and we need to start connecting that way again. You know, just being spontaneous, having people over, you know, inviting people over. or inviting people. You know, there's not a lot of free or inexpensive places to just show up and meet up with people. You know, so we need to kind of reestablish these old kind of ways to connect that I think are very important. You know, whether it's a potluck or, you know, meeting up at a community meal. That's another way where you can meet up and serve together. That's another cool way to do it. So anyway, so us little separate humans down here yearn for connection. You know, we all want to feel seen and appreciated and loved and heard. And the best way to do that is to go first. You know, be that person. There's no risk in it, I swear. So anyway, so let's see who's here tonight. I love you guys. Yeah, these meat suits are complicated and yet not. But it's so important to remember that physically, emotionally, and spiritually, so much of the dysfunction in our world can be healed if we can just connect. You know, and look at the things that are dividing us. They're the problem. They don't want us connected because there's an energy created when we're connected. You know, and we're going to find out who the real bad guys are if enough of us get together and start talking about it, okay? And they don't want that, so we're going to do it anyway because you guys are my badass fairy bugs. So if you follow me, you already kind of get this, and so let's do it, okay? So have an event, schedule some time with me, or come to one of the open houses that I have. And again, guys, I'm out there in the world doing this every day somewhere. And so, you know, if you want to donate on my Venmo, that's great. That it's always goes to, you know, doing something good. You know, even if it's just keeping the event space going. So anyway, so let's see. Hi, Patty. I think Patty was the first one in the door. Well, hi, Rudy and Denise. I love you guys. So how's life for you guys? What's going on? Hi, Frank. Yeah, guys, we just... Oh. I turned the camera around. That was my parking lot. I have my own little patio set up out here in the city. It's wonderful. Anyway, hey Frank, it's so good to see you guys. Yeah, guys, we're all thirsty for those things, but you know, frankly, we're not filling our own needs either. We think that self-care and that nurturing is selfish, but it's not. It really it releases things in our body that help lift our mood. You know, and we do need each other. You know, we can be alone, but we really do need others to help nurture us and sustain us, and that's the way to do it. So anyway, so if you have any questions, just reach out. And I'm so grateful for all of you following me, and let's stay connected. You know, let's get out of our comfort zone, let's get out of our own energy, and just, you know, let's make an investment in ourselves, okay? You know, an investment is something that potentially grows over time, okay? And you're worth it. You're worth it. And having this spiritual perspective just puts a lot of this human stuff in perspective, you know? And we don't give it as much energy as it deserves. You know, there's a lot of people out there doing the wrong thing, okay? But if enough of us come together and we connect, and we start supporting and encouraging and acknowledging one another, we can heal this world. But it takes a village. So let's do it, okay? I love you guys. Thanks for following me. Thanks for watching tonight. And if you have any questions, just reach out, 216-324-2657, or just go to my website, mariannegoldweber.com/events is where you will find all the things that I do. All right, so thanks so much, guys. Call me. Let's have a party. I love you. Take care.